Warning: Geeking Toyetic is a show aimed at the adult collector, and as such features adult language and humor that is not appropriate for younger audiences. Viewer discretion advised.
Welcome everybody to another episode of Geeking Toyetic. I'm your host Larry Roberts, and on this show we talk about toys. Old toys, new toys, classic toys, retro toys, all the different kinds of toys out there that I love to collect. And basically it's a show aimed at the adult toy collector, nerds like me who just can't get enough of them. Before I go any further, I'd like to thank all of you for all your likes and your comments and your subscriptions to my channel. It means the world to me because I just love talking about this stuff, and I love meeting other people online who like it as much or maybe more than I do. So thank you so much. In this episode, I thought I would feature a subject that is something that I've been really into for a while now, and that is modern retro toys. Now, what do I mean by modern retro? That seems like an oxymoron. Well, what I'm talking about are modern toys that you can currently find on store shelves or through online toy retailers that are designed to be like classic retro toys from our youth. So these are new toys, but they have packaging or style of the figures or the whatever it is that's in there. It's designed to look like the toys that we remembered. In some cases, they're pretty much exact repro replicas of the old toys. And in other cases, they're approximations that look classic enough to really, touch that nerve inside of us, still reach out to that 8-year-old that's still inside all our heads there. But it's done in a more updated, modern kind of way. Now, there's a whole bunch of these modern retro toys out there. I don't have the time or the space to get into all of them, but I thought I would feature just a handful or so of my favorite ones, the ones that really have piqued my interest and the ones that have been making its way onto my shelves the most. So I'm not going to do like a countdown of best to least or anything like that because I can't make up my mind about which ones I like more than others. So I'm just going to go through and talk about the ones that I find to be the best of the modern retro toys. So here we go. First up, I'm going to go right to one of my favorite ones, and that is Masters of the Universe.
What would you do with all the power in the universe?
Now, Masters of the Universe is a line that started in the early 80s. I'm sure anybody who's watching this channel knows about He-Man and the Masters of the Universe. I loved these figures. Came out towards the tail end of my childhood, so I only had a couple of good years with them before I grew out of it. But yeah, these figures were great. I have a couple of the original ones here. I mean, everybody remembers what these guys were like. They had these kind of squatty little bodies. Came with cool characters like Battle Cat. Of course, everybody remembers Castle Grayskull, all that stuff. And He-Man himself. Well, of course, as everything else goes around, comes around and all that stuff, Masters of the Universe has gotten really popular again, even with younger kids and stuff. Like, everybody knows who He-Man is. And so it goes without saying, they had to bring it back in toy form. Now, Masters of the Universe is not new to the whole modern retro repro thing. Back in the early 2000s, they actually came out with what they called the commemorative series of figures, where they came in these fancy outer clamshell box things, and then inside was a replica carded version of the original figures. And I don't remember how many of these they came out with altogether. Somewhere around like 14 or 15 of these characters came out in the early 2000s. I loved these commemorative series figures, but they were out for a very brief amount of time, And these have gotten to be pretty damn hard to find on the aftermarket. They're not a whole lot easier to find than it is to find the actual original carded ones from the 1980s. Later on in the 2000s, they started coming out with Masters of the Universe Classics figures. Now, in some ways, they did have a retro appeal to them, but very clearly these were designs that were modern and new. Not to mention they came out with that new Masters of the Universe cartoon and those figures that came out in the early 2000s. It was all really cool, but it really wasn't that retro. Until recently, Super 7 decided to come out with the As Seen on TV line, where these figures are definitely more in line with the originals from the 80s. And what they did with these to make them a little bit different, where they differentiate from the commemorative series, is that these had color schemes and stuff that was supposed to look more like the cartoon versions of these characters. Now, if you know or don't know, the original He-Man figures came out before the cartoon did. So by the time Filmation started doing the cartoon, they changed some of the colors and some of the look of those characters from the way the action figures looked. And this kind of finds the happy in between. I was really excited when these came out. I love these figures. I think they're super cool. I think they have now possibly discontinued doing these because I've not seen any new ones. And I think that's because they had to make way for the Masters of the Universe Origin series. So starting just in the last year and a half or so, Mattel started offering these awesome Masters of the Universe retro play figures, otherwise known as the Origin series. Now, these started out being a Walmart exclusive, but now they're available pretty much anywhere that you can order action figures like this. These figures are great, and what's really awesome about them is that they're super retro. I mean, anybody walking down the aisles that grew up with these toys and remember them from the 80s is going to instantly recognize these. The packaging very much looks like the old school packaging, and the figure pretty much looks like how you think you remember it. But if you compare it, say I've got Man-E-Faces here, you compare it to an original Man-E-Faces, you could see quite a bit of difference. There's a difference in the sculpting, difference in the overall size, a little bit of difference in the paint and stuff on there, but it's enough of a close approximation that it really sparks that whole that little retro memory thing that you have going on in there, and it's great. I love these. I love the fact that they're an updated version. It's not just a reproduction. As much as I love the basic straight up almost reproduction style that we got with the commemorative series and then later with those Super 7 ones, I just really think this is the right way to go. It's taking something super classic and bringing it into modern times. And these have been really popular. And on that note, we're going to do a little sidestep, and I'm going to take you into what I consider my Geek Seek of the week. Alright, so the Geek Seek of the week, if you're not familiar with this, is where I talk about a particular toy or toy line that I think is worth seeking out, that you may not be aware of, or you might not know you can get a really good deal on. And in this case, I think it kind of qualifies for both. Talking about Masters of the Universe toys, I mentioned how Super 7 came out with those As Seen on TV retro toys a few years ago. They had changed the motif slightly to look more like the cartoon versions. I love them, a lot of people loved them, but they've now made way for the Origin series that Mattel is putting out. But did you know that those Super 7 figures came out in completely different packaging from other countries? Not only other countries, but really awesome versions from other countries. First of all, they released some of the Super 7 Masters of the Universe figures in Japan in this Japanese white box packaging. I mean, look how cool that is. I love the way he looks in the box. I don't think you can get the whole line like this, but don't quote me on that. I've only seen a few of them, like He-Man and Skeletor. I have the He-Man one here. I love the look of this box. This artwork that they put on the box here, And on the back, that is just, it's so Japanese. It's so amazing. I just love the combination of that whole Japanese style with Masters of the Universe. Now, you can find these online at places like Big Bad Toy Store. And believe it or not, it's pretty affordable. I think I got this for like around $20 American. You can't beat that. And especially since just finding the regular Super 7 versions is getting harder and harder anymore, this is a really cool alternative. But the Japanese box version isn't the only cool alternative. Another one that's coming from Central, Middle America, and South America are these Los Emos del Universo. I'm sure I'm pronouncing that wrong. But it's basically Masters of the Universe in these amazing boxes. Look how cool this is. I have this Stratos here. He comes with all his weapons and stuff bagged in the background. I mean, wow, this is an amazing packaging. Now, I understand some people out there, you open your toys, you don't really care about the packaging. I get that. But for people like me who love to display stuff like this on their shelves, these are really, really cool. Now, these are starting to get a little bit more scarce, I've noticed, as I've been trying to collect them all, buying them online. But again, now these are not as affordable as the Japanese box ones. These are going to run you up closer to $30 or so. But trust me when I say, man, it is worth it. This is such an attractive box. I love the classic old cards, but I love the fact that the box looks like a boxed version of the cards. And on the back side of the box, it's got the great cartoon art. It still looks classic. This is like the packaging we probably wished we had back in 1982, but didn't. This is great. And it's really cool too because you can open it up more easily and take the figure out if you want to display it and then put him back in there. Because I think he's only held in with like little zip tie guys and stuff. So this is really cool. I highly suggest you check these out. I think down the line these are going to be very collectible on the aftermarket because a lot of people don't know that these exist. So that's my Geek Seek of the week. You can find it at, like I said, places like BigBadToyStore.com and other places online. But get them before they run out. Moving on to another batch of awesome modern retro toys that I'm really into. It is these G1 reissues from Hasbro of the Transformers. Now, anybody that collects Transformers knows that the G1 style figures are, they're really in demand, and getting boxed versions of those is super expensive and hard to find in good condition. So these sort of modern retakes, and they're not exact reproductions of the originals, but close enough, especially in terms of the packaging and stuff. These are really desirable. Again, I think right now they're predominantly a Walmart exclusive. Why does Walmart gotta get all the exclusives? It drives me nuts, but it is what it is. They started coming out with these a few years ago, and they put out a couple every year, and I know that there was Optimus Prime and Soundwave. There's been a whole bunch of them, and they've even come out with like really cool stuff like this Gigawatt car, which is basically a mashup between Back to the Future and Transformers. I know they've done one for Top Gun with a jet. They're doing more stuff like that. There's a Ghostbusters Ecto 1. And recently they just started coming out with these Headmaster ones. These are currently on the shelves at Walmart. I love these. I love the packaging because, again, they get me with the retro packaging and stuff, and I just like the way that they display. And again, the nice thing about these is you can open them up and take them out and display or play with the toys if you so desire, but you can still keep the really cool boxes to put them back into. So love these Transformers. I'm really, really hoping they keep coming out with more because I've been very happy with them. And so far, knock on wood, I've been able to get all of them, which isn't always the case, as we'll get to with some of these other lines. But Transformers, these are great. Moving on, but keeping it in the whole Hasbro family, we have the retro Ghostbusters action figures. I was super excited when I found these last year. I did not see these coming, but I guess it makes sense. Ghostbusters is as popular now as maybe ever. I mean, they've had numerous, retakes. We're supposed to have more retakes coming out soon. People have really latched on to Ghostbusters, not just oldies like me, but even kids love Ghostbusters, so it makes sense that they would bring these toys back. And these are really cool now. These are almost exact repros of the originals as they came out back in the late 1980s. So as such, they don't necessarily appeal to everybody because a lot of people say, well, I already have the originals and I don't want to buy these new ones. But a lot of us don't have the originals, and especially when it comes to Ghostbusters. Ghostbusters had so many parts and moving features and like cool little action features and stuff that it's really hard to get them complete and in good working condition. So this was a welcome thing to my eyes and to my collection. I love these figures. Again, I believe these are a Walmart exclusive. Damn Walmart, always getting all the exclusives. But so far, these haven't been impossible to get your hands on. They were a little tough at first, but now you can get them pretty easily. And they just recently announced some new additions to the line. So apparently this is going to keep going, and I really love these figures. So yep, Ghostbuster retro figures, they get a big thumbs up from me. All right, and moving on, another modern retro line that really is no stranger to being modernized in a retro way is GI Joe.
Look, let's get out of here. Cover turning tail. Want to live good, buddy?
GI Joe!
Now, GI Joe has never totally gone away, even when the Real American Hero line ended sometime in the early mid-1990s. It continued on in various other forms, and there were Toys R Us commemorative editions that came out a while back, and then we might remember back in 2007 they started coming out with these where they were on these retro style cards, but it was updated versions of the figure that still felt kind of retro, but definitely with modern design and tooling. But just recently, Hasbro came out yet again with another version of retro GI Joe figures. Now, these are basically the same thing as the 25th anniversary ones that came out in 2007, just with an updated version of the packaging. But frankly, I really like these better than the 2007 ones. Now, I really like the 2007 25th anniversary ones, but these just look a little bit better. I like the bigger bubble. I like having all the weapons on display like that. I like the shape of the card. Of course, it's got the classic style artwork, just like we had back in the 1980s. These are great. What's also super cool is the fact that not only are they reproducing the figures, but they're also doing vehicles as well. We've got the Cobra Hiss here, we've got the Cobra Fang. I love the fact that they come with drivers. I mean, the Fang never came with a driver, if I recall, so that's kind of a new thing. These look great. These boxes look amazing. And again, these aren't exact reproductions. They're tooled to be a little more modern and stuff. That's fine. I think that that's perfectly fine. It's the best of both worlds. We've got modern tooling, modern design, but just retro enough to really spark that kid in you again. And another property that's been the focus of a lot of retro style toys lately has been that of classic monsters. And I'm talking like Universal monsters, Hammer horror, all those old school monster toys. Now, we had plenty of those back in the day from all sorts of different companies, whether you're talking about the old Aurora model kits, or the Mego Mad Monsters, the AHIs, the Remcos, the Lincoln Monsters. Man, back in the 60s, 70s, and early 80s, those monster toys were everywhere, and they were awesome, and they're some of my favorite toys of all time. They're very hard to get in most cases, and they're very expensive. So it's really cool to see that they're getting back into those again and bringing out these. They're not exactly straight up repros, but again, they're designed to look like the older toys and even like this aquarium floater guy and stuff. It's just to bring back those memories and give you that old school monster vibe. Especially in the case of like the Super 7, you know, the reaction figures and stuff that they've had coming out. They were specifically designed to be takes on the old Remco figures that came out in the early 1980s. And you could see that the packaging is really, really similar.
Fangs bared, creature surfaces dripping with rage. Phantom shows his fiendish face.
Especially between this Nosferatu and this original Phantom figure I have. And I just love that. I mean, because this figure never actually existed in the old days, so it's kind of like expanding on an old line that was cut unfairly short, because I think there was only like 5 or 6 figures that came out in the original Remco line. So it's really cool to see them expanded upon, and then they come out with all these different versions. I love the artwork on these. It looks just so throwback style. I mean, I just am a sucker for these things, and if you can't tell, I'm a big Creature of the Black Lagoon fan, so I have to have all the Creature figures. Of course, Super 7 aren't the only ones getting in on the action of these retro-style monsters, because Mego, who recently got back into action back in 2019, have jumped in as well with their, man, they've got a whole bunch of classic monsters they've been coming out with. In some cases, they're ones like we saw back in the old days from the Mego Mad Monsters, like Frankenstein. This one's a completely glow-in-the-dark version of it. And, you know, they had, Mego didn't do it, but we had the Creature from the Black Lagoon that had come out from AHI, Azrak Hamway, and this is like a Mego version of it. We did see a version of this come out from Diamond Select. I think it's basically the same figure, but they've re-released it now more for the general public as part of the regular Mego line. And then they've added stuff. They've added things, you know, we never had Phantom of the Opera, you know, Mask of the Red Death. This is a super cool figure. And I mean, even though this didn't actually come out back in the day, the way they designed it, everything from the packaging to the style of the figure itself and the costuming and stuff, it's definitely retro style. This looks like something you would have bought at Woolworths or Kresge's or Ben Franklin back in 1978. And, you know, I love that. And then coming out with things like Hammer Dracula. I mean, I'm just such a sucker for these. These are some of my favorite modern retro style toys. Some of them are a little hit or miss. Not all of them are great, but generally I love these figures, and they are out there for sale right now at, you know, Walmart or Entertainment Earth or any of those places where you can order these figures. I highly suggest you check these out. And since we're on the subject of the modern Megos, I'd be remiss if I didn't bring up the fact that they're doing all sorts of other retro throwback style characters. I mean, things like the Star Trek ones. I've got a Romulan here. I mean, the original Romulan from 1976 is one of the, it probably is the most expensive Star Trek Mego from then, so it's really cool to see it again. It's done almost exactly like an original with a little bit of updating and stuff, but really cool. And then stuff like this is the stuff that we dreamed about when we were kids, having an Ultraman figure. I loved Ultraman when I was a kid. I still love Ultraman. I watch it all the time now, the old episodes from Japan. And this kind of figure was available in Japan back then from companies like Popey, or Popey, I think it's Popey. Available from companies like Popey, but it was never available in America. But here you go, you've got it, and he looks retro styled. So again, another type of modern retro figure that just really appeals to people that love that whole aesthetic.
Star Wars action figures sold separately from Kenner.
And yes, of course, if you thought I wasn't going to talk about it, of course I'm going to talk about it. I had to bring up the Star Wars Retro Collection figures. Now, out of all the toys that I've talked about in this video, I would say these are the ones that are probably the most approximate in terms of being a straight up like reproduction. Obviously, there are enough defining characteristics to make you know that it is not an original. For one thing, even though the card is designed to look like an old card, It says retro collection on there. It's got the fake weathering that some of us have not decided whether we really like or not on these things, but it is what it is. But the figures themselves are almost exactly like the originals. Now, they are slightly different in size. If you held two figures against one another, like if I had an original Stormtrooper out of the package and put it up next to this guy out of the package, you'll be able to tell that they are slightly different, which is good because that helps combat unscrupulous people, scalpers and stuff online who want to pass off these things as original. On the whole, that has not been too much of a problem, thankfully. But for many of us, these are really exciting. This is exciting to see these things on the shelves again. That is, when you can find them on the shelves, because as with a lot of the other toys that I've talked about in this video, these were exclusives. Now, the first line of them, the Star Wars A New Hope ones, were Target exclusive, and those were pretty tough to find on the shelves. Then they started coming out with the Empire Strikes Back ones, and these were, a Walmart exclusive. And as is the case a lot of times with the Walmart exclusives, they're a pain in the ass to get, especially guys like Boba Fett or even Yoda were really hard to find, and they command already a pretty high price on the aftermarket as such. Now, whether or not these figures are going to be available in the future at other online retailers and stuff, we don't know yet. We've been waiting because the Target exclusive ones you can order from other retailers now. Hopefully the Empire Strikes Back ones will come out later through someone else like Entertainment Earth or something, but so far nothing yet. And soon we're going to have the Mandalorian retro style figures. Now those are obviously modern characters from a modern storyline, but they're going to be done in this retro style. So that's pretty cool for people that maybe didn't care so much about having these repro style figures because they already had the originals. But if you're really into the Mandalorian and you love those original styled kind of figures, then you got to get those, right? I know I already ordered mine, so hopefully they'll be here soon, and when they are, I will feature them here on the channel. But yeah, these are really cool figures. They even came out with reproductions of the board games, and what was cool about when they did these was the fact that they included a figure with it, and the figure they included with the board games was a retro vintage style figure that was never made before. Like, this is supposed to be a Luke in a snowspeeder uniform. They never made that back in the day. The other board game, the Death Star game, came with a Grand Moff Tarkin figure. They never made Grand Moff Tarkin back in the 70s. So it's pretty cool. It does offer something to even the stodgiest of vintage collectors that say, I don't buy modern and everything. At least there's some new variations on that might pique their interest a little bit. But yeah, these are really, really cool too. I'm just curious to see if they're going to keep expanding it. And I really hope they do, because I'd love to see more new characters added to it like they're doing with Mandalorian. And I'd like to see more of the reproduction of the original ones, because some of those are really hard to get, and as long as they make it definable enough from the vintage ones so that it doesn't cause a problem on the aftermarket, man, I'm all for it. And while all of those I've talked about in this episode are some of the most popular and some of my favorite retro style toys, I mean, that's only the tip of the iceberg. There's so many different kinds. There have been retro style toys aimed at young kids from the 80s, such as Strawberry Shortcake re-release and Rainbow Bright. We've had things like Ninja Turtles are now starting to see retro style toys being released here. I've got this awesome box set I got from Target that's got a bunch of carded figures in it to look like the old Ninja Turtles. Everybody remembers the Ninja Turtle toys. These are some of the most fun and most colorful toys to ever come out. And once they come out with more of these, because I know they're coming out with another set that's going to have Shredder and Bebop and all the villains and stuff in there, I'm going to do a more full, comprehensive look at these. But I wanted to mention them just so you know that they're out there. And then for kids from the 70s, I mean, They've started re-releasing Evel Knievel stunt cycles again. These are so awesome, and these are pretty close approximations of the ones we had back in the 70s. I know I had one of these, and I played with it to death, basically, till the damn thing fell apart. This is a lot of fun. You can find this. I think this is an online-only exclusive. I will try to include a link below if you're interested in this. And then, I mean, if you think that retro-style toys are only left to 60s, 70s, and 80s, man, now, I guess because 90s is retro, we're even getting into retro 90s toys because we're getting things like Spider-Man on his old animated series cards that came out back in the early 1990s. There's X-Men ones like that. They've been doing all these cool retro 90s figures that look like the old Toy Biz figures that we would find in many bins at places like KB and Toys R Us. But it's got its draw, it's got its fan base and stuff, and a lot of people now are nostalgic for that style from the 90s, so we're even seeing that. Just recently they came out with retro style figures reproducing the original Mighty Morphin Power Rangers characters, and those are really, really cool. And from what I understand, they're selling like hotcakes. The pre-sales for those are really going through the roof. So it shows that there's no end to nostalgia for the toys from your childhood, and that is why these classic retro style figures are coming out in modern times. If you're interested in this stuff, man, you can find it in all sorts of corners of the internet where they sell these things. Go to Entertainment Earth, Papo Loco, Big Bad Toy Store. There's tons of places like that, or just check out your local Walmart or Target and you might get lucky and find things like these Turtles or Star Wars or the Monsters or any of those. They're all out there, and you know, they're a lot of fun, and it's a good way to turn on new generations to these characters too at an affordable price, or at the very least bring them home so that if your kid tears them apart, he's not tearing apart, you know, your childhood original from 1990, because that's never a good thing. All right, folks, well, that's all I have for you today. I hope you enjoyed this episode and this look back on these modern retro toys. I know I've been wanting to talk about it for a long time. If you'd like to see me do more in-depth features on any of the toys I talked about in this episode, please, you gotta let me know in the comments or in the Geeking Squad group on Facebook. Let me know what you think. Let me know if there's something major that you think I missed. I know you people are good about telling me things that I missed out on, so let me know that. And I will feature it in a future episode. Until then, keep hunting toys and keep having fun, and I will see you very soon. So, thanks. Bye-bye.